We'll jump into today's episode right after this announcement. For over 13 years, something remarkable has been happening. Rural hospitals and other small healthcare organizations that have partnered with Capstone have been achieving results and forming workplace cultures that even we are blown away by. It is truly a game changer when rural hospitals are the provider of choice and employer of choice so they can keep care local and margins strong. Far more healthcare organizations need to experience what's possible. That's why we're stepping forward in a bigger way, expanding our team of experts, expanding our capabilities by adding a strategic planning division to expand our ability to help even more rural hospitals and other healthcare organizations in 2026 and beyond. Capstone will continue to be the partner that small healthcare organizations can count on to meet them where they're at and guide them towards a stronger future. You can learn more at capstoneleadership.net.
Welcome to Culture Change RX, the podcast for healthcare professionals that are committed to creating a thriving workplace culture, improving the experiences of employees and patients, and ultimately unlocking their organization's next level of potential. I'm Sue Tetzlaff, your host and co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions. Join me and my insightful guests each week as we share actionable insights for navigating the crucial people side of the business of healthcare. Subscribe now for a weekly dose of Culture Change RX. Now let's dive into this week's conversation where culture change takes center stage.
Welcome to another episode of Culture Change RX. And today in the studio is Julie Coneset. She is one of our transformational experts at Capstone Leadership Solutions. And in particular, she is an expert in what we call phase one activities in our partnerships with small and rural hospitals. I'll have her introduce herself a little bit more to you as we get going here. But before I have her do that and we get into our conversation, I wanted to tee up a bit about what phase one means and where it fits in our work as transformational strategists, trainers, and coaches to small and rural healthcare organizations. So in our work at Capstone Leadership Solutions, we partner with healthcare organizations, and it's not a short engagement. Actually, it's about 26, 27 months that gets this work done and helps to really change the trajectory long term of organizations. And that takes a bit of time. And there's an approach, a process, a framework, a formula for systems, and our work with organizations that make that happen. And so we divide that work into two phases. One is very short and one is very long. Phase one is about 8 to 12 weeks. And then phase two is actually 2 years. So indeed, one very short, one very long. But this first phase, this start of our engagement with healthcare organizations that is designed around really strengthening their position as employer of choice, provider of choice, so that they can keep care local and margins strong. This is, big, important work. And this first phase is really an important part of those initial first steps. And so Julie is definitely an expert in this area and really aligned side by side with our new partner organizations to walk them through these initial steps as they start this change in their organization. So with that, Julie, I'll turn it over to you to first introduce yourself a bit more to those that don't know you yet. And also then maybe go right into a first question, which is, even though this is a short period of time, only 8 to 12 weeks, at the end of it, how do you know you're done? Like, what are the deliverables? What do we hand over to the organization? What can they expect to see at the end of this? And then we'll circle back to, okay, what's the process? How do we go about getting to the end of that phase one? And so, introduction and then an answer to a big question.
Well, thank you, Sue. My name is Julie Coneset. I'm Capstone Transformational Coach. I have over 30 years of rural healthcare experience, with a majority of that time spent in human resources as the employee relations manager. And I had the opportunity in our organization, when we decided it was time that we needed to do something to transform our culture, I had the opportunity to lead our employee experience team and our employee communication and training team. And I was also the right hand to our initiative champion. For 16 years, I served in that role until I left the organization. So by the time that I left, we'd had over 50 leadership development trainings and multiple employee trainings. So my background is HR, and my love for taking care of employees and taking care of people so they can take care of the people in their community. And my role here at Capstone has afforded me the opportunity to do that, to continue to work with rural healthcare organizations so that they can make a difference in their hometowns with their family and their neighbors and such. So I really love the work that we do, and I feel it's truly purposeful. And so I'm really excited to talk about phase one and what it means to be in phase one as a Capstone partner. So at the end of that 8 to 12 weeks, some of the deliverables that our partners will leave with are a team structure. Their team structure will be set up. Those teams will have specific action plans broken down by quarter for their first year of their journey. There will be a leadership action plan, so quarterly training and recommended topics based on the 9 core leadership practices and some of our findings in phase one. And we'll help them set up their goal cycle, or also take the baton. If they already have a goal cycle, we'll meet them where they're at. We'll take that baton and make sure that we incorporate that into their leadership training and their action plans as well. The organization will have identified a journey name, because it's not the Capstone initiative. It truly is theirs. So it is part of my work in phase one. I work with the initiative champion and coaching them. I'm working with their steering team to complete a vision and why activity, and then take that even further as far as what do they want to call their journey. So they name their journey, and then from that point on, it becomes mission excellence. It becomes the Keystone Project, whatever that may be, whatever it has meaning to them. Because as you mentioned, Sue, our work with them is a little over 2 years. And oftentimes partners renew and we have long-standing relationships, but at the end of those relationships, they have a product that they can carry forward into the future. And it's sustainable. The framework has been implemented. So that's what they can expect to have at the end of our time together, and really setting them up for phase two work. So we've kind of laid that foundation so that they're ready to hit the ground running when our coaches come on site for visit one.
Fantastic. Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned the naming of the initiative as part of the, what gets done and completed in phase one, because it's an important part of sustainability long term, that it's not something that starts and stops. It has, staying power when you make it yours, you give it a name. And so our very first partner, their name was the Cornerstone Initiative, and now they've named a building after it all these years later. That's much a part of who they are and what they do. Now, you mentioned that, they'll have a leadership development plan. They'll have a team structure and annual action plans for that team. They'll have their goal cycle, timeline, and activities all mapped out or optimized. So the deliverables are very similar across organizations that we work with, but they all look different. In the end, over that 8 to 12 weeks, the process makes that leadership plan for one organization look different from another. The goal cycle of one organization look a bit different than another. The team structure and the action plans from one look different than the other. The names are different because they're branded as theirs. So what are the steps, maybe just going back to like the very first early part of, okay, they've committed to this work. We've agreed to partner together to do this work. What's that first initial contact and engagement? You're when you're with them on maybe a first call, getting ready to map out this phase 1 activity?
Sure. So the first thing the organization does is they identify an initiative champion. So that is someone that I'm going to have weekly calls with, and that's someone that's going to kind of lead the charge, if you will. So in phase 1, there's a lot of action items for them. In phase 2, it's making sure that the action plans keep top of mind, but they then have an entire steering team that support the initiative. So they're not doing it all. They're holding people accountable. They're making sure that the action plans are reviewed and that the organization is moving forward. But it's a whole team of people. They're leader-led teams, but they're employee-driven, right? So it's a little bit of a unique approach so that we get those frontline employees bought in. But in the first call with that initiative champion, we talk a little bit about what their role will be in the journey. And I have a phase 1 checklist that I'll share with them. We have a data and information request because there is a lot of information that's shared. And one of the things that I would like to point out is we ask you not to create something that you don't have. If you don't have a community needs assessment, don't try to pull something together and create it. If you don't have an employee engagement survey, that's okay. All it is an opportunity to share information. So we kind of go over those things. And that's some of the information that those early calls we talk about, right? The data and information request, the kinds of information that we want, how we want them to send it so that it's easy for them. And then we start our calls. There's a framework of I have an agenda. I'll have to-dos so that the initiative champion knows what they should work on this week. I also provide resources. So it's broken down into bite-sized pieces because it can be really overwhelming if you look at the entire 8 to 12 weeks and everything that I have to get accomplished, because one of the first action items of that initiative champion is identifying what teams. So we have core teams that we recommend that we know are tried and true and work. And one of them is an employee experience team, a patient experience team, and a communication and training team, and the steering team. So the steering team consists of all your team leads and potentially other executive admin professionals, your CFO, your CEO, your C-suite, right? Because it's important that they're at the table and involved in the journey and leading the organization forward. So kind of creating that steering team. And then once we have those core teams, we look at as an organization and see if there are other needs. Maybe your strategic plan identifies and has a focus for community involvement. So maybe it would be a good idea to set up a community team. Each of these teams we recommend anywhere from 8 to 12 people. And that's 8 to 12 employees to be part of these teams. So some of the early discussions are that, identifying what their needs are. Where can we best put our resources? Maybe we're a small organization, we don't have enough employees. Can we still make a community impact with the core teams that we have identified? Absolutely. We just make sure that that's it's built into the action items of other teams. But if we really have a focus and we want to set up a team for that, then we can do that. But we have those 4 core teams, the steering team, patient experience, employee experience, and our communication and training. So then once we set those teams up and we look at the organization and we say, who would be a great leader for these teams, right? To lead the charge, have the meetings, and kind of help facilitate. They're leader-led because leaders know the bureaucracy for getting things approved or if there's something to be purchased or things like that. And they can also navigate those team involvement. Sometimes that takes an extra skill of encouraging brainstorming and sharing ideas and taking action items. So it's leader-led, employee-driven. So we'll have conversations about setting up and identifying those team leads. And then we go into talking about, we have the team leads identified. Now, how do we want to populate our teams? What's going to work well for your organization? And we want to create some excitement around the journey that you're going on, so that steering team will, your CEO or your initiative champion will have some journey communication, which we provide some examples. And anyone that's worked with Capstone knows that we have a mantra. It's called the CASE method. Copy and steal everything, make it yours, and make it better. And so we will give you, those are some of the resources that I provide in follow up to our calls, so that we are, like I said, breaking each step down into bite-sized pieces. And while the initiative champion is working with the steering team and getting that set up and doing the vision and the why, and they're working on naming, I'm working behind the scenes. And remember, I mentioned in that first call, that data and information request. So they're sending all kinds of information, patient experience scores, employee engagement scores, their handbook, if they have any standards of behavior, if there's a culture of safety, a community needs assessment. So I'm taking all of that information and I'm studying the organization from afar. One of the early items that your steering team and your entire leadership team will do is, we have 3 surveys that we will send out for your team to complete. And there is a solutions checklist, a leadership needs assessment, and a change survey that's done. And what that does is just identifies where the priority is. So if there are solutions that are alive and well in your organization, I'm able to uncover that in that survey. And it helps prioritize where we need to focus. The leadership needs assessment, the 9 core leadership practices. So your leaders will take that and it'll rank them for us. And then I could see, like, for example, maybe the top 5, the first leadership practice that is identified or uncovered in that survey is strengthening relationships. Then maybe well-being or hiring and onboarding. But that's only part of it, because I'm also following up with the results and having conversations with your initiative champion. So for example, if hiring and onboarding ranked number 8 of the 9 core leadership practices as a priority, but I know that your strategic plan and your goals are to focus on hiring and onboarding, then I'm going to move that up in the top 5. And when I say move that up, I mean, remember I said at the end, one of the deliverables is a leadership action plan. We don't just roll that out based on this is the order it goes. We're looking at your organization. What did the leadership needs assessment survey tell us? What are the priorities based on goals or your strategic plan? And we're making adjustments. So we're building that based on partner organizations and where they're at. We're meeting them where they're at. And there's a change survey that helps us just uncover and identify where we might have potential barriers or opportunities. So if baggage is one of the top change obstacles, you could say, then we're going to build that in. Maybe there's a baggage exercise that your leadership team or your staff will do at their commitment event. So it's all really tailored to specific in your organization and what your priorities are. So while every team, every organization builds this framework, sets the foundation, and has a plan, it is going to be specific to your organization and what your priorities are, so that we're setting you up for success so that you can move farther and faster. And the biggest thing, I think, is to remember that progress, not perfection, right? And sometimes there's a feeling of overwhelm and, wow, how are we going to get this all done? But we know in our experience with the dozens of organizations that we have onboarded that it can happen and you can have great success, because we've had the honor to be a part of that. And so that plan development, the plans are on the higher end of difficulty, but that's with a purpose, right? And we know that when we strive to achieve those, even if we land a little bit short, we are going to be so much farther ahead. And sometimes those plans we unearth opportunities for improvement, right? Like we see some problems or barriers surface as a result of that. And that's not a bad thing. That's an opportunity for us to take that and move forward. So that's all part of phase one. And then, phase two, we continue to support, train leaders and work on those plans. So that was
Nice. Yeah.
probably a long answer, but
That it does require a long answer, doesn't it? Because it is the short phase, but there is a lot packed in there. And in particular, because it's not cookie cutter, it is all really based on understanding top strategic priorities and the biggest challenges and opportunities, that the organization is facing that can be uncovered during good assessment and data review and the like. There are a couple things in there, Julie, that I think people, might pick up on or have more questions about. So I'll prompt that. One is that yes, we are developing these plans for year one for that, first year of implementation in phase two. Is that, we're really hijacking the creation of those first year plans, whether that's a leadership development plan, whether it's the goal cycle plan, whether it's the action plans of the teams. Like we're really doing that heavy lifting of that planning work and assessment work for these specific things. And this partnership ends, and then it's like, okay, who does that for them going forward? And so I know people do ask that question when we get, engaged with them. They're like, how are you going to keep doing this for us, once our contract ends or our partnership ends? And so that really, begs to year two, even at the end of year one and into year two, where we're helping them learn to do this planning process ongoingly themselves. So they're participating and watching it in the beginning. But why do you think it's important that in year one, that we are the ones that are crafting those initial plans in the first year?
well, I think based on our experience with knowing what works and setting that foundation, we're able to set the foundation and the framework and making sure that we are getting those initiatives rolled out in year one. For example, the employee training event. And sometimes I think having that outside perspective and have it be handed to us, sometimes we get in our own way. And I know this in our organization of we have these ideas, but then other things pop up, right? And other initiatives come into play. And we're like, well, we can't do that right now. And so it might get put on the burner. And then it's where you're sort of picking, like cherry picking, okay, well, we're going to do this positive communication standard, but maybe that's not really where the priority is. Maybe we've identified that telephone etiquette is a positive communication standard, and we've identified that we have an issue, based on our study and assessment. So I think we have an opportunity to lay that foundation and make sure that those key action items get put into building that framework. And then when we work with teams in phase two to do the look back, look forward, and implement and have a little more say in their plans, and they can understand the process then. And we've had partners who have said, once they get through that phase one and they get almost to the end of year one, they look back and they say, oh, I understand now. Because it can be hard to see and to envision what it looks like until you get through it. And then hindsight's 2020, right? You look back and you go, oh, okay.
I see how all the pieces pull together. Yeah.
You see how it pulls together.
Yeah.
And I see now there's a process. And so we do have tools for them to be able to facilitate that. And those meetings and team reports and the importance of making sure that we're as a steering team, supporting our teams with their action items. So I really feel like it's because of our experience, and not only have we lived through it in our own rural organization, but we've partnered with many organizations, and we learn something every single time we do that. And we take that knowledge and we make improvements to make it better for the next partner.
Mm-hmm.
So I think really being able to leverage that experience is a gift that we're able to give.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It would be very challenging to engage them fully in the planning in year one when they really don't have the basic understanding of the structure, the systems, and the solutions. There'd be so much education that went into that the planning would take, maybe a full year, because there'd be so much versus you could have had so much already done in that first year. And then when they go to plan for year two, we're speaking the same language, right? Goal cycle, leadership practices, foundational solutions for the employee experience team, the patient experience team, we're all speaking a different language as we collaborate to learn how to plan for the next year and the year after that. So, but we do know it kind of goes a bit against our framework to really, take that much lead and kind of hand them a plan for the first year. It goes against our own framework in which we're helping them create ownership, right? And there's a lot more ownership in something when you help co-create the plan for it. But there's also a lot of ownership in it when you figure out how to implement the plan. So that's what the teams are really doing in year one, is learning how to work together to implement versus learning how to work together to plan. They learn to work together to implement first. There's a lot of ownership in that. Okay, yeah, we got this on our plan, but what are our ideas for that? What one are we going to select? What one are we going to go with? And then who's going to do what to make that happen? A lot of ownership is created in that implementation, but in the future, it's created in both the planning and the implementation. But in that first year, it is far more successful, and so much more can happen positively for the organization. And then we can move on to self-planning and independence in that. Yeah. So thanks for that. Maybe people didn't anticipate, a question like that, but we do get that question, really, you're going to do the plans for us? The other thing I was thinking about when you were talking about going through this process, Julie, with the organization of really helping set up their team structure, those core teams, maybe some additional teams. And for those that may not know this, these aren't teams that start and stop. These are teams that can live on for decades. I mean, we know teams 20 years plus in. Our very first, partner organization was almost 14 years ago, and their teams are still going. These are teams that serve the organization long term because they're really linked to top core strategic priorities of a healthcare organization, people, service, and quality primarily, right? And then leveraging that for growth and financial improvements. So that we got team structure to set up. We've got a leadership model and a plan to onboard and train leaders to then coach and mentor them to that model. We've got a change process for teams and leaders to learn how to identify and remove and prevent barriers. Then we've got this goal cycle. Now, we meet organization where they're at. You've used that phrase a few times. When we go into an organization, they might already have some of this stuff going on. They rarely have all of it going on. These systems, we call them 4 systems. They may have some of it going on, but when I think of, of the dozens of organizations where I've been part of phase 1 activities with them, to be honest, it's easier if they have none of it happening. And of course, that means the results are probably likely, poor and trending or average at best. But it's actually easier to stand up everything fresh instead of grab the baton, understand what they have going on. Even a team structure. If they have a few employee-driven teams or even one going on right now, but in our experience, our knowledge, how it's going to kind of morph or alter into this new structure and new purpose and new action plans, it can be harder to change that and alter that or sunset it. And than it is to say, okay, there's nothing there. We've got a blank canvas and we can just build it all fresh in year one. It's actually easier to start with nothing if you want to think of it that way. But we know most organizations already have things going on. And so we have to figure that out and then figure out, okay, in year one, how are we going to make whatever that structure is, whatever that leadership plan is, whatever that goal cycle is, how do we actually take it from where it's at and make it better? Because we don't want them to like eliminate it and start fresh and like stop everything and start fresh, or they're going to feel like all the efforts they've made in the past have been for naught. Like, wait, like, can't we like build on this versus throw it all out and start over? And we really do want to like build on their past successes, build on, make it a next phase of this work to get better. So do you want to speak at all to, your experience now also really leading these phase one processes of what it looks like based on where organizations, are currently at when we engage in our work with them?
So even if they already have some of these solutions or these things in place, maybe they already have a standards of behavior, we still build that into their plans, because what we want them to do is take an opportunity to look at it, right? We call a study and adjust. So that might be an action item in the first quarter of their plan, studying and adjust current standards of behavior. And looking at those, so that would be the employee experience team. So they also have an opportunity to collaborate with the patient experience team, because we have positive communication standards. Are there some of those standards that should be part of our standards of behavior for all employees? So collaborating with them, and some organizations look at it and say, these are great. We don't need to make any changes. So then what, if they refresh and re-inspire, then we just encourage them to bring them top of mind, right? Today is a new day. This is how we team around here, and this is how we're going to treat one another around here. And so you kind of spotlight and bring the focus back on those things. So I mentioned this earlier too, progress, not perfection. If you already have something, you don't have to scrap it and start over. Look at it and identify if there are tweaks or opportunities to just refresh it and use it as an opportunity to re-inspire your staff. So one of the things that I wanted to mention about the plans too, when you had mentioned the hijacking, is we don't just create these plans and then deliver them to the teams. These plans are gone through, they're evaluated, and they're shared with the IC to get their reaction to that too, so that they have buy-in and they've seen it before and says, yes, this is an alignment with our strategic initiatives. This supports our plan. I think this is good. So we have an opportunity to have dialogue and make changes based on that feedback, or to explain the why and recommendations a little bit further. And part of that conversation is when, maybe an IC says, we already have this. Why is this on the plan? Well, because it's important to the foundation, and we want to look at it and see if we need to make changes or adjustments. So it's an opportunity. Sometimes we're guilty of rolling out something in our organizations and never circling back to refresh and say, hey, does this still work for us? Maybe it's a service recovery policy and we don't even, it's not top of mind, it's not used, but we need to dust it off and resurrect it and have that be part. So those are all conversations that, I'm able to have with the IC before we share those with the teams.
Yeah. What I was also thinking about too is, meeting people where they were at and understanding, what they were doing in the past, what was working in the past, what wasn't working, but what they've tried, whether it was successful or not, or got some level of improvement or not, is, it's not unusual for us to go into organizations, partner with organizations that have, really engaged in other formal transformational work, whether it's through custom learning systems, the Disney, Leadership Institute, the Studer Group, or Huron now, is that Maybe, we come in right after an engagement has ended with another formalized effort, or maybe it was in their past and there's still some, resemblance of that in the organization. Some of that is still going on. In some organizations, they've either topped out or didn't get the results they wanted. And, or also, they kind of stopped, they lost traction and decided to move on. But again, we don't want them to feel like any of those investments were wasted, that they failed. And now they're having to start over, because that's really increases change fatigue in an organization. It's one of the 7 barriers to change is change fatigue in an organization. And so we've really had to learn to understand those other approaches so that we can see evidence of where they got with that and what kind of results they got with that approach. And then be able to bridge that for them to say, well, this is how you did it, during that work. And this is how it, alters a bit in this way. And this is why, as we build your leadership plan, or as we build your employee experience plan, or as we build, one of the year goal cycle or whatever. So it's really compelled us not to just understand individual healthcare organizations, but to understand other approaches that are out there to improve healthcare organizations. If we're following some of that work, whether it's been recently or well in their past, we're going to see evidence of that. And we want to honor that work and help make our work with them and this new approach they're adopting feel like a next step or a next phase in their organization's growth and improvement trajectory. That it's not, we failed and now we're starting over. So that's kind of that bigger picture of some of the other things that we have to know about the organizations we're now partnered with. Yeah. So understanding changes and how organizations have gone through formalized or informalized changes, whether it was on their own or with the help of others. I love that we have our assessment tools, Julie, to help guide us now to assess for change challenges and things like change fatigue and understanding what past changes have been implemented so that we respect and understand, and we set them up for success for these next changes. But next, as we end here today, Julie, what I would like to focus on maybe a different topic of phase 1, which is relationships. So we've talked a lot about, the work that has to be done, the tasks that have to be completed to get that work done and to have the best outcome of these phase 1 activities. But, our work, again, it's long. It's 26, 27 months or more as we're working truly as a partner to organizations. And so, this is an early part, these early weeks of an important long-term relationship. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to, as you're going through these activities, what does that mean for the start of this relationship we're forming during phase 1?
I can. I think one of the things that I pride myself and our organization on is we've all been on the receiving end of partnership or a product that we purchase, right? And we have a sales call, or then we have an implementation team, and then we never see them again, right? They help us get this new computer software up and running, and then we're passed off to someone else. But at Capstone, it's not like that. We build these relationships. So I spend time every week, 8 to 12 weeks with these initiative champions. And it's important for us to, Courtney takes the lead on the phase 2, and she's the coach that attends that visit 1. And so she is brought into the loop to meet the partners and to plan for that visit so they can start to build that relationship with her as well. And then other Capstone coaches as needed are brought in so we can kind of build that relationship early on, setting that foundation for a successful relationship. And then at the end of my time with them, that doesn't mean that I no longer get to work or have a relationship with them. I support their teams in the chats. We have chats for all of the teams, the patient experience and employee experience and so on. And so as Capstone transformational coaches, we chair those chats. So I then get an opportunity to meet these team leads and to support them and meet their leadership team when we do leadership trainings. And in the first 6 months after a partner finishes phase 1, they have a monthly call with a capstone coach. And so I also help support and serve in that way. So it's a matter of we get to continue that relationship. I don't see them every week anymore, but I've built that foundation and we're able to support them in that way. And then our capstone coaches come on site and have an opportunity to have face-to-face time, but again, supporting them through the chats and the one-on-one calls. So after phase 1, they'll have monthly calls. And then after about 6 months, they'll transition to quarterly calls, as long as there's not something going on in their organization that they might require a little extra support from the capstone team. And so we can do that. So it's not we're done with the phase 1 coach. I have an opportunity to continue to build that relationship, but meeting every week and learning about their organizations is very impactful and rewarding for me.
Yeah. And you're just talking about, the personalized one-on-one calls that our partners get in phase 1 and then continuing into phase 2 for the 2 years. But then we have group coaching calls and, so there's lots of opportunities even for you to interact with our organizations because you help facilitate some of those group calls as well as some of the trainings that are offered. So you do get to interact with our partners in phase 2 as well, which is great because they know you, they trust you, you have a relationship with them. And then it doesn't end at the end of phase 1, which I love about our model. I also love how your work is handed off so beautifully from phase 1 to our phase 2 team, which of course you're part of that too. But, it really feels like because we use a team approach that all of this that from phase 1, you're able to support the teams when they come on site for visits, the coaches that come on site for visits, to be able to incorporate all of that unique organization-specific information into the work that these coaches are doing on site, that they're really armed with that because you have a beautiful handoff to them for that. So that is great. Plus, kind of pulling back the curtain here and looking behind the scenes, our team has a weekly, what we call a serve call every Wednesday morning. So actually, we're recording this podcast after our weekly serve meeting where our team gets together every week. You included, Julie, but also Courtney leading phase 2, Whitney, who really supports all of our coaches and all of our partners behind the scenes, is that we're able to get together every week, look back in the last week, what happened with our partners in the last week, what's coming up next week for our partners, who has calls, what group calls, what trainings, what visits, and all of that. So even though you work so closely with them in phase 1, every single week you're hearing updates or you're being able to weigh in on the implementation of all of that was planned in phase 1 and check in. And so it is a beautiful model. I just, as we're just here, and of course we're so close to it each and every day, but as we're here kind of zooming out and sharing with the world what this looks like, I couldn't be more prouder of this approach. And I think part of that is both the relationship side, the people side of it, the connection side of it. But then, of course, the data geek in me loves the results side of it. So this 8 to 12 weeks, it is so beautiful at the end of year 1, end of year 2, and beyond to see the measurable, amazing improvements in healthcare organizations and know that it all started in phase 1. It did. So any last minute comments, thoughts that we can bring forward, Julie, as we wrap up today?
The one thing on my notes that we didn't cover is we also have the opportunity to do some senior leader strengthening in phase 2 if that's identified as a need. And oftentimes that may come out in the change survey, that there's an opportunity to do some strengthening. Sometimes we have new executives, senior leaders on the team, and so we also have that opportunity there. So it's all part of that, meeting them where they're at and building those relationships. And I think we definitely are a relationship company.
One of our values.
And it is. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to serve rural healthcare organizations across the country.
It is such purposeful work, isn't it? It gets us out of bed excited every day, doesn't it, Julie?
It definitely does.
Well, thank you for taking the time today to be here as a guest on the podcast again. I will let our guests know that Julie actually holds the record for the podcast with the most downloads. So I'm actually going to link that episode in the show notes here. She's been on the podcast more than once, but your episode on annual performance evaluations is still circulating out there and getting lots of listens. So I hope this one does too. So thanks for being here, Julie.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. And for our guests out there, whether you're new to the podcast or you've been listening for a long time, it would be great if you would share the podcast with others. So whether it's this episode, a different episode that really resonated with you, or just in general, letting people know about Culture Change RX. And this podcast is released each Wednesday. Sometimes they're solo, sometimes they have our coaches on as guests, and sometimes there's other industry experts and other types of guests on the show as well. So quite a variety there, but always about the people side of healthcare. And so please join us and also spread the word about the podcast. We would very much appreciate it. And we'll see you again next week on Culture Change RX. Bye now.
Thanks for tuning in to Culture Change RX. If you found value in today's episode and you are a believer in fostering change in healthcare, join us in making a difference. Follow, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. Share it with colleagues and your network. Together, we can make a lasting impact. Until next week, keep inspiring positive change.